Told you anything in Denver about the tragedy we had up here during the winter of 1970?
I don't believe they did.
Well, my predecessor in this job hired a man named Charles Grady as the winter caretaker. And he came up here with his wife and two little girls, I think about 8 and 10. And he had a good employment record, good references. And from what I've been told, I mean, he seemed like a completely normal individual. But at some point during the winter, he must have suffered some kind of a complete mental breakdown. He ran amok and he killed his family with an axe. Stacked them neatly in one of the rooms of the West Wing, and then he put both barrels of a shotgun in his mouth. Police, I thought that it was what the old-timers used to call cabin fever.
Well, that sounds fine to me.
How about your wife and son? How do you think they'll take to it?
They'll love it.
Right.
Good evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. It's the 15th of April already, 2015. There was problems getting the live show out tonight, so this one is being recorded directly onto YouTube, and you can access it there. My website is thomassheridanarts.com, and you can get my books there too on the little tab on the right that says Bookshop, Defeated Demons, Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, Gamble of the Psyche, and Walpurgis Night, or Walpurgis Night, we're going to call it. I just got back from Norway a few days ago. I was over there doing some speaking events and doing some research for the upcoming book, which will be out this summer. I had a great time as usual. Met some very interesting people, and I might be going back later in the year. I think I might have got a part in a film. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And all's good. I stayed in a chap's house there in a place called Orkanger, of all places. It was near Trondheim, which is it's just out of the Arctic Circle. And literally right through his back garden was a narrow gauge railway. It was one of the oldest, in fact it was the oldest electric railway in the world. And it's still operational as a tourist line during the summer, but it used to carry a very high grade iron ore from the mountains down to the fjord, which is absolutely enormous. It goes for miles and miles inland, and then exported. During World War II, the railway line was heavily guarded by the Nazis, the German occupation. The reason being that at one point most of the German munitions was depending on the output of this mine to keep the war effort going. And it had an interesting energy about it. I took some photographs and I walked along the tracks, and I picked up some of the old ballast. The ballast that they used for the tracks was not stone ballast. It was shale from the mine, so it had a very high iron content. So I picked up some pieces that were just pure iron ore, and I just I'll do something with that. It's kind of got an interesting energy impregnated into it, not just because of how it was extracted by the mine, but it was probably there since the war anyway. The rail line closed commercially back in the early 70s, and the ballast looks like it hasn't been replaced since. So those kinds of things always interest me. On top of all the other things there, I did some talks in some beautiful venues as well. And I met some lovely people and had some great experiences. And it's a remarkable country, Norway, in two senses. This is the first time I actually went there that I felt really at home and connected to the place. I think perhaps my ancestors came from that area around Trondheim. It was really interesting flying into the airport. The plane literally comes in between two mountains, and when you land, the fjord is right at the end of you. So scenery-wise, it's spectacular. Also, there was a different energy in the area compared to other parts of Norway I was in. I see a lot more kids who are kind of like punks and goths and things like that. In the airport, there's a lot more people smiling. When you go down to Oslo, it seems a bit dour somehow, a different kind of culture. So I felt very, very at home there in that part of Norway. So I'm back now, and one of the talks I did in Stavanger is actually up on my YouTube channel, Thomas Sheridan Arts, and you can check that out there. Now, speaking of energies, I want to talk tonight about hotels. Now, first I want to talk by saying there's an occult aspect to hotels it's often overlooked, but it's something that has always appealed to me. I know it's going to sound weird, but I actually love being in hotels that are empty. It's happened to me a good few times now, and I've been in hotels. In fact, I was in one in England about 3 years ago, where I was the only guest in a very large hotel. It was on a Monday, and just about everyone had went home after staying there on the weekend. And I just walked around the hotel looking at all the artwork, and it was at night, and nobody was around, and there was a very powerful energy in the air. It was a modern hotel, and I just was soaking up the energy. When you think about a hotel, what you really think about is the enormous amount of psychic energy poured into it. A lot of it would be malicious, a lot of it would be good, people on holiday, but there are certain hotels around the world that would be used more for business and things like that. And these hotels can be very, very dark, to the point where you can almost sense it in the walls. Another interesting thing that has happened to me, of all the years I've stayed in hotels, I've never ever, to my knowledge, ever had a dream inside a hotel. And I usually have quite vivid dreaming. Whether I'm at home, sleeping in my own bed, or sleeping in other people's houses, I always have vivid dreams. But whenever I'm in a hotel, I can't recall any dreams, ever having dreams. Now, yeah, we always think of the sinister aspects of the hotel. We think of Bates Motel in the film Psycho, which brings up another aspect. Was the actual behaviour of Norman Bates caused by his dead mother or caused by the hotel itself? The whole emphasis is placed on the guest who's staying there, almost as if she's entering a world from which she cannot leave. To invoke the Eagles song Hotel California, I still don't know what that song is about. If you have any theories on it, just post to the comments in the YouTube thread. I always think of California, or also Cali, Californication, the Kali, the Hindu, the Vedic deity of debt. One of the most powerful experiences I ever had in a hotel was staying in the Brussels Hilton in Belgium. Now, this was not long after the Cold War had ended, and this hotel, like many Hilton hotels, are very large and very central and very favoured for these kind of espionage, Cold War activities. I would not be surprised if Hilton hotels, or the people behind it, were involved in building these hotels just for these reasons. Be interesting to know if any of them got grants from the CIA or the military for making these hotels central points for meeting. But that hotel, I'll tell you, really strange experience at that hotel was it was the first hotel I ever stayed in that had an electronic swipe card. Now, not the ones with the little holes in it that looks like the IBM Reader card, but like a credit card, and it never worked. I could not get it to work. Every time I used it, a woman had to come up and actually open the door for me. And she took the card off my hand and ran it through the swiper, and the door lock immediately opened. I would close it and say, "Watch this," and I ran my hand down it, and it would not open the lock. It was almost like the room did not want me to be in it. And when I was in the room in the Brussels Hilton, it felt very dark and very oppressive. Now, Hilton hotels are very nice. The rooms are large. They tend to have all the mod cons and comforts in them. Especially they have tables for business people. And this room is no exception, but it felt that dark, oppressive, nasty energy about it. And being where it was in Brussels, it would be in the centre of NATO, the centre of the Cold War, the European Union. And not only that, all Brussels is also a big centre for arms dealers, and arms dealers would meet in these hotels and share guns and sell guns and all this kind of thing. And all that energy has to go somewhere. The first person to probably tackle the idea of a hotel becoming a conscious entity was Stephen King in the book The Shining, in the Overlook Hotel set in Colorado. The book is much more insightful in this regard than the film. This is one of the problems with the film. The film is a masterpiece, there's no doubt about that, and it really works. But Kubrick left out one important element. He left out the consciousness of the hotel, because in the book, the hotel itself is a living being. It's an animal. Not an animal, it's a creature, an entity. While in the film, it seems to be just a straightforward ghost story. There's ghosts in the hotel. There's ghosts of this guy who murdered his family. There's ghosts of the murdered family member, and and the bartender, and people that were in the hotel. But the book is quite different in the sense that the hotel itself is the entity, and the ghosts you don't even know if they're in the hotel or if they're tulpas that have been created by the hotel itself to manipulate people, particularly who are psychically sensitive, such as the young lad in the film, but also Jack Nicholson's character Jack Torrance in the movie, perhaps because he's a guilt-ridden ex-alcoholic, that the entity targets that in them, because the hotel itself is not only conscious but it's also psychopathic, and it looks for the weakest link in a psychic chain. It can't target the kid directly, but it can target him through visions and ghosts and tulpas. It can't target the wife at all, mainly because in both the book and the film she's portrayed as not very bright. But it can target Jack Torrance because, one, he's a recovering alcoholic. Two, he's riddled by insecurities. In the book, they go into more detail of why he lost his job. He lost his job because he broke his son's arm, and this had him suspended and thrown out of school, so he couldn't teach there anymore. So he saw the hotel and being locked in there over the winter as almost like a form of salvation plus penance, locking himself away from society to write a novel in the hope that he would atone for accidentally breaking his child's arm and robbing his family of their livelihood. If you imagine the hotel becoming a psychopathic entity, it would target him first because of these insecurities, because his psychic firewall had been corrupted and removed by alcoholism. Because he was desperate to write this novel, it would actually become the narrative within the pathological narrative within his consciousness. Now, in the book, the the hotel is really incredibly racist. It has these vicious, nasty dialogue and commentaries. It's a dark creature. The hotel itself is the living entity. That was actually filmed in the I think it was called the Stanley Hotel in Boulder, Colorado. And how that book came about was that Stephen King took a holiday over there with his family. And like me in that earlier story in the hotel in England, they were the only guests in the hotel. And he had the idea to come to write The Shining based upon that. He changed the name to the Overlook Hotel. The film is good, but I can understand why Stephen King was angry about it. Firstly, by the lack of Kubrick making the hotel a living entity, and also I remember in the novel there was a heavy focus on the trees around the hotel were almost portrayed as like a pathological version of the Ents in Lord of the Rings, in that they seemed to be coming closer and more menacing all the time, as if the forest was encroaching on the hotel to swallow it. Can a hotel become conscious? It may sound like a preposterous idea, but when reality, when you think about it, it's kind of like a default version of transhumanism. Transhumanism is all about pouring the consciousness of an individual into an object, a computer circuit, a network, into a digital mainframe. Well, when you think about it, a hotel is not that different. You have each room in a hotel would be like a cell or a unit. It would be like a piece of data, a string of code. One room in a hotel could have the most enormous levels of psychic, sexual energy poured into it. You just think about the things that have went on in a hotel. All the beautiful things, people having love affairs, people on holiday, people enjoying themselves, having a good time. All the dark things, businessmen far away from home, trying to make a sale, worried about their jobs, sitting there flicking the TV remote, becoming increasingly depressed, darker, masturbating to porn because they're lonely. You couple that with perhaps drug deals that took place in the hotel, arms deals, criminals, murderers on the run, businessmen or politicians about to embark on the most wicked corruption in order to destroy lives, citizens, countries, nations, all contained within this box. The psychic energy is released in each one in the course of a year. Say in a major hotel in a large city, just in one room, that energy, that psychic energy, sexual energy, is infused in the subatomic materials of the room. Now you multiply that then by 100, or like the Hotel New Yorker in Manhattan, where it's like 1,300 rooms. And it grows and it grows. Well, an interesting thing about the Hotel New Yorker on 8th Avenue, when I was a kid and first went to New York, I was working in a bar near there. And I always remember that hotel. At the time, it was owned by the Mormons. And the Mormons, that hotel had a raunchy reputation before the Mormons picked it up. And used the hotel for their own little bits, or their own business. It was also the hotel that Nikola Tesla stayed in during his final years in the 30s and 40s, and the one that he kept all his documents in before the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, I think it was, seized them. But the Mormons had a specific interest in purchasing that hotel, which they did in the 70s. And when you look at the Mormon Church, it's a very sinister entity. You just have to look at their main cathedral in Salt Lake City, and yet of all the hotels they buy that one. So it's almost like they were drawn to it again. The Mormons are like a collective Jack Torrance who were drawn to the Hotel New Yorker for similar reasons. So there you are, you have these hotel rooms, and the TV is always a central focus in the hotel room. The scrying box, staring at that, flicking at the channels in a foreign country, not understanding the language. Well, that was also kind of exciting to me as a kid, and not a kid, when I travel. And you add that up with all the other things. So each hotel room becomes a cell. Each hotel room becomes a psychic womb. Then you multiply it by all the hotels in the entire hotel. You couple it all together. And my God, what a powerful psychic charge that is. A psychic charge that for most people is probably dormant. A psychic charge that is probably inert, I should say, until the right kind of or the wrong kind of individual, the Jack Torrance, enters into it, and all the potential, all the psychic, sexual, and other potential of that giant building is discharged into that individual. Which brings me to the story that I spoke about this week, and I posted on newsymbolsmedia.net, about the strange case of Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel, or the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. This story is truly bizarre, especially when you can see the CCTV footage of the young Canadian student, she was only 21, in the hotel, seemingly what looks like someone who's going through a psychedelic experience or a schizophrenic experience. Let's assume that let's assume we know what schizophrenia is, and maybe involuntary shamanism. But the gestures of her hands are so strange. She presses the buttons on the elevator and nothing happens. Now, we don't know for sure if she did press the buttons, but she appears to be. But what's also strange is that when she exits the the elevator into the main hotel corridor, as clear as anything, there are bizarre and strange and quite disturbing moving shadows, I'll call them shadows, in the hotel elevator, even though she's not in there to cast them. And some of them, now I know you can have that sort of simulacra confirmation bias where you can say, oh, that looks like a person, that looks like a shape of a human being, but some of them really do look like that. That could be my imagination, but either way, it makes no sense that these shadows are being cast. Another thing I don't understand about the video that was released is the CCTV footage was recorded in 2013. If you go to any hotel, today, and that includes 2013, video is recorded digitally. It's not recorded onto videotape. And it's usually very, very good high resolution. Yet the video we see of Elisa Lam in the hotel elevator is really fuzzy and really bad, like it was recorded on 1980s or early 1990s VHS videotapes, or the old UMAX tapes that went on a very slow speed in order to get, they would make a 2-hour tape last for 24 hours. So the tape went really slow. So when you played it back, the actual speed of the tape, so when you played it back, the image was very fuzzy. But it could be enough to get a prosecution or to see someone doing damage. And that's what the video of Elisa Lam looks like. I don't understand why that video is not crystal clear. That video should be crystal clear. I'm sure the insurance company that the Cecil Hotel uses would insist on them using an upgraded, state-of-the-art, digital recorded video system. And yet in February 2013, the video of her that appears looks like it's something out of the 1980s or the early 1990s, recorded on slow-moving videotape. This makes no sense to me. It's almost like they deliberately released a fuzzy CCTV recording. And even so, you can still see these bizarre shapes moving around inside the elevator. Her hand gestures are also very strange. Now, I once watched a documentary on schizophrenia, and two people spoke who'd been cured of schizophrenia, by the way, whatever schizophrenia is, that they used to wake up or look at their hands and their hands didn't look right. They'd be on backwards. And she seems to be doing that at times. But she also looks like she's petting things or gesturing or talking to smaller beings or something that we don't see. Now the story just gets more tragic. She vanishes after going to the roof. Now if she wanted to commit suicide, why didn't she throw herself off? Apparently what happened was she was found inside one of the water tanks on the hotel roof. And her body was discovered on February 19th. This was over 2 full weeks after she went missing, after she was in the elevator, by a maintenance worker who opened one of the rooftop, these heavy metal covers on the rooftop tanks, after the guests had complained about the water tasting funny. How disgusting is that? Authorities later ruled Lamb's death as an accidental drowning. Now, video surveillance footage from inside the elevator showed Lamb acting strangely, pressing the multiple elevator buttons, hiding in the corner, that was another weird one, and waving the arms in a strange manner. People in the hotel said that she seemed possessed, but of course we've been told she had bipolar disorder. Now, bipolar disorder does not... Anyone who whatever bipolar disorder is, what that is weird mood swings. People who have high, they're happy one minute, they're in a bad way the next, they're depressed the next. That's not what she demonstrated. Was not bipolar disorder. So, and they said could have contributed to her death, as well as a strange behaviour in the elevator. Well, okay, if she was suffering from bipolar depression, why did she go to the trouble of taking all her clothes off and getting into the water tank? If she would have went to the roof in the elevator, she just would have thrown herself off. Now, the hotel itself has a very strange... The Cecil Hotel has a very strange history of suicides, people jumping off the roof and killing people on below. Richard Ramirez, during his missing years, stayed in the upstairs rooms at the very top of the hotel. The Black Dahlia was reported to have been in the hotel, or last seen in the hotel, before a body was found chopped in two halves. So the place is a strange place next to Skid Row. Now, it gets even stranger, and they say they're synchronicities, but they hint at conspiracy. They also hint at occults and cults being involved. When Elisa Lam, she travelled from Vancouver to check into the hotel, she wound up, as I says, in a 2 foot by 8 foot cylindrical metal water tank on the roof. People have been washing and cleaning themselves the whole time while this was going on. Now, at the same time, coinciding with the death of Elisa Lam, an outbreak of TB was spreading through downtown Los Angeles. It's right beside Skid Row, where the homeless live. And health authorities were urging the citizens to get tested for TB, tuberculosis. The name of the tuberculosis test was Lam ELISA test. Now, are we dealing with incredible synchronicities? Are we dealing with conspiracy to spread TB among the population? Are we dealing with a cult? We all know that all cults, flying saucer cults and so on, work with the intelligence services. That's why the ones that survive get money, have alternative news websites and so on. These are the, and seem to be, they live in big mansions. That money didn't come just from donations. That money is directly coming from the Pentagon or from Thames House MI5 or from the French Secret Service. You don't get that luxury lifestyle in a palace or a mansion just by donations and website ads or writing a few books. It comes from somewhere else. It comes from the intelligence services. What also sets off the idea of a cult for me involved in this was the Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker thing as well, being there. But it's either synchronicity or it's showing us just how fucked up, the psychopaths in charge are. That they actually concocted this whole thing and came up with the Lama Lysa test, her name in reverse as a black magic thing. A bit of fun, involved with a cult that operate out a hotel. We'll never know. Or if this is all a coincidence, all a synchronicity, which is still incredible considering what happened. And then you think about this hotel and all the horrors, the malice, the loneliness, the sexual perversion, and everything else over the decades being poured into that hotel. Was she a Jack Torrance? A real-life Jack Torrance? Did her alleged bipolar disorder allow the entity in the Cecil Hotel to get in there? It's just one of those things that stops me from being an atheist. It's just this Fortean incredible stories that just go on and keep constantly appearing. This story has not been debunked yet on any level. Other than they say, oh, it's just all a coincidence. But what happened in the case of this tragic young woman is like, it's such a series of coincidences. It's as incredible as anything. It has to be deeper, of course. But we'll probably never know the real reason. Another case of potential, shall we say, conscious hotel entity penetrating a disturbed or broken psyche was the story of, I'm sure you remember of it, a guy called, he was a Saudi Arabian prince called Saud Abdulaziz bin Nasser Al Saud, from the royal house of Saud, that despicable, monstrous creature that runs Saudi Arabia, that has all the oil and all the wealth in the world, while most of the people in Saudi Arabia live not only under Sharia law but also in absolute poverty. But this piece of shit, when he entered a hotel, he murdered his submissive male slave in a top London hotel in 2010. There was a sexual element to the murder, but the prince repeatedly denied this. This is very common in the Jehovan cultures. Catholic priests rape young boys and preach about celibacy. Mormon bishops murder their wives so they can run off with their boyfriend and claim that the devil made them do it. Certain sects of rabbis suck the blood off baby boys' penises. They bomb Gaza and they talk about being peaceful. And then here we go. This is Islam, the other part of the three-headed beast from the Middle East. And it's believed that it denies homosexuality and anything else, but here's this top prince involved in an S&M relationship. But anyway, the prince repeatedly denied there was anything sexual or S&M going on. He was charged with the grievous bodily harm of the ferociously attacking the submissive in one of the hotel's lift, and again the whole thing was caught on CCTV. The submissive whose name was Badar al Badula Aziz had bite marks on his cheeks and evidence of bites on the ears. Some of the bite marks predated the murder, and the dental patterns matched Al Saud's teeth. We were hearing about we're thinking now about the Jimmy Savile thing and the teeth marks on the body of Irene Richardson that he would not give his dental bites for. This is animalistic. This is bestial. This is not human. The bites were believed to have occurred in a sadistic sexual situations. Apparently the pair had been carrying out an insanely brutal master-slave relationship for some time. Al Saud had frequently attacked his personal servant for his own personal gratification, although he denied his homosexuality. Even when a gay masseur gave evidence, Al Saud had allegedly requested the masseur after viewing him on an extremely homoerotic website. The prince was denied diplomatic immunity, which is quite surprising, and was jailed for life despite his wealth and royal blood. But he had confessed his homosexuality. He may have well been decapitated if allowed to return to Saudi Arabia anyway. So he couldn't actually say he was gay because he would have been beheaded. But I doubt that would have happened in that. They only behead women or poor people over there, since homosexual remained a capital offence there. You see, this is why I have to laugh at all you types who, who support Islamic countries. If you forget that, they're pretty hellish in many ways in their own way too. And as all these Jehovan cultures are, they just spawn this stuff. This is why I spend my time saying this doesn't belong in Europe, for good reasons. And then you have these hotel disasters. I want to remember one of the most disturbing things I saw as a kid was a terrible hotel fire that took place, I think it was in Brazil, back in the 70s or the early 80s, and it had people jumping off and trying to catch the ladders on the way down. It's one of those things you see when you're quite young and you're still very sensitive. I mean, if I saw it right now, I'd probably feel the same way. But it just leaves you in a mess. There was a hotel back in Atlanta back in 1946, the Weinkauf Hotel, and it was supposed to be this fireproof hotel. It was so fireproof, according to the architects, that they didn't even have to build fire escapes, and it turned into a real life towering inferno. 119 people lost their lives in a fireproof hotel, and an amateur photographer called Arnold Hardy was awarded a Pulitzer Prize for his photograph of a woman falling from the blaze to her death. Most of the people who died were jumping out the windows, and this is the death cult thing as well. He gets a Pulitzer Prize just for being lucky and being morbid enough and psychopathic almost enough to take a picture of a woman jumping to her death from a fireproof hotel. The darkness of that, the darkness of the whole idea, the culture of that. And again, another example of an individual who may have been easily psychically targeted, if there's such a thing as a conscious element, a sort of a reverse transhumanist conscious element in a hotel, was a guy called Castro Castrado. He was a famous Portuguese television presenter and a TV journalist. He was celebrating New Year's Eve in New York's Times Square with his 23-year-old male model boyfriend Renato Sabra. All going well, but the relationship deteriorated along with his own mental state. He became angry when spurned by Castro and denied further access to his sugar daddy's money. This is the younger guy, Sabra. The couple began to argue noisily. Sabra smashed Castro's head with a laptop as his lover lay bleeding on the floor, castrated him with a broken, jagged wine glass and a blunt corkscrew. At the court trial, Sabra initially pleaded insanity. He claimed that at the time he believed he was ridding the world of homosexuality by removing Castro's testicles and then wearing them on his wrists. The prosecution, however, claimed that Sabra was only faking mental illness. Now that's pretty strange in itself. Apart from his violent outbursts, he was shown to have acted in a cold and manipulative way throughout the whole relationship. Psychopath. As the judge said in a summary before convicting him to 25 years in prison, it was an extremely brutal, sadistic and dehumanizing act. Now just think what these all took place in a hotel. The idea of the infected being more easily infected. Another hotel that's interesting is near where I live, and this is one I'm actually can personally vouch for. It's the Clarion Hotel in Sligo, which used to be St. Columba's at home for the insane. It was an insane asylum for the dangerously insane. The hotel is an enormous Gothic building on top of a hill, which is very strange in such a small town to have this mental hospital built. For starters, it's absolutely vast, even by the day's standards. Even in this massive stone building, it has two churches on either end, one a Catholic and one a Protestant. One is called the Canis Major and the other one is called the Canis Minor, which are quite beautiful, again, Gothic type looking structures, which are used today for weddings. The hotel itself has all been modernised on the inside out, but I spoke to some guys who worked for the construction company Sisk, they're a big construction company here in Ireland, on the building of the hotel, and they found dungeons in the basement. Now this place was still open in the 80s. They found dungeons in the basement with giant chains. When a patient was having an episode and was violent, they put a chain around their neck, and these people would run and scream inside this dungeon in the bottom of a building, and then be held back by the chain. Now, there's an interesting video on YouTube about a doctor in a psychiatric clinic who firmly believes, a retired one, that schizophrenia is in many cases a form of possession. Another entity gets in there. So you have this building that's about as unpleasant as you could possibly design a building, to put people in who are, mentally ill. In many cases, they're very violently mentally ill. They have chains around their neck and they run around in the basement screaming. And today, that's now a hotel. So it's a brand new hotel. Who knows what that place will be like in years to come? And it's built on top of a hill overlooking the town. It's almost like everyone in Sligo would see this gigantic mental hospital and come hotel, look up it and say, "Oh, that's where you'll go if you don't behave yourself." The Four Seasons Hotel in Munich. Let's not forget that one. That one was built back in the 1858. And if you look at their website, they talk about the whole history of the hotel, but they completely miss the period in 1919 when the Thule Society, as documented in my book Walpurgis Night, were running arms for the Thule Combat League and the Prussian Free Corps to overthrow the Bolshevik Soviet in the city. Were not only doing that, but at the same time were involved in seances and other occult activities. At the same time, they were running a paramilitary group involved in revolutionary or counter-revolutionary activities. And you look on their website and they give you the whole history of the hotel. And when they get to that period, they say they completely ignore it. They just have a little line saying, then there was a period of political upheaval in Munich and Bavaria, and then it goes to the next owner in the 20s. And yet that had an incredible history. The appearance during the seance, which has been documented. Now, whether they were actually real people or whether they were tulpas, but the actual appearance of a countess and a prince, Turn von Taxis, who were murdered by the Reds in a schoolyard a few weeks before, appeared to tell them that the savior, the Charlemagne of the German people was about to appear in the hotel any day now. And he would lead Germany to salvation, but also lead Germany to ruin. And there was literally Adolf Hitler around the corner. It eventually walked in at some point. And again, it happened in a hotel. So there's a lot more truth to the story of the Overlook Hotel and The Shining, I believe, than just fiction. In fact, I even think when Stephen King was in there, he had a strange dream, unlike me, in the hotel, of his son being strangled by a fire hose or something like that, and that's where he came up with the idea for the story. But the next time you're in a hotel, try to imagine that you're in a room where anything would have went on thousands and thousands of times prior to you having been there, and try to sense and feel the psychic energy within that room. And more, if you get the chance, more importantly, if you find yourself staying in a hotel room, just walk the empty corridors, observe the ambience, just look and feel, and you'll be amazed how that building starts to feel less material, and your senses will change. They become more heightened and more intensified. But whatever you do, don't let yourself become another Jack Torrance. This is Thomas Sheridan on a pre-recorded episode of the Velocity of Now. And take care of yourself, and I'll see you again next week. In fact, if they can't take a joke. Thank you.
Now, let's see if we can improve this with a little water, sir.
All right, I'll just set my bourbon and advocat down right there.
Won't keep you a moment, sir.
Fine. What do they call you around here, Jeezy?
Grady, sir. Delbert Grady.
Grady?
Yes, sir.
Delbert Grady.
That's right, sir.
Mr. Grady, haven't I seen you somewhere before?
Why, no, sir. I don't believe so. Uh-huh. It's coming off now, sir.
Mr. Grady, weren't you once the caretaker here?
Why, no, sir. I don't believe so.
You, married man, are you, Mr. Grady?
Yes, sir. I have a wife and 2 daughters, sir.
And, where are they now?
Oh, they're somewhere around. I'm not quite sure at the moment, sir.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here. I recognize you. I saw your picture in the newspapers. You, chopped your wife and daughter up into little bits. And, then you blew your brains out.
That's strange, sir. I don't have any recollection of that at all.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here.
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir. But you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. I should know, sir. I've always been here. Did you know, Mr. Torrance, that your son is attempting to bring an outside party into this situation? Did you know that?
No.
He is, Mr. Torrance.
Who?
A nigger.
A nigger?
A nigger cook. Your son has a very great talent. I don't think you are aware how great it is. But he is attempting to use that very talent against your will.
He is a very willful boy.
Indeed he is, Mr. Torrance. A very willful boy. A rather naughty boy, if I may be so bold, sir.
It's his mother. She, interferes.
Perhaps they need a good talking to. If you don't mind my saying so. Perhaps a bit more. My girls, they didn't care for the Overlook at first. One of them actually stole a pack of matches and tried to burn it down. But I corrected them, sir. And when my wife tried to prevent me from doing my duty, I corrected her.